Everest, Chapter 10. Chris, Bryn, Tilt, Sammy, Perry, and Dominic were still standing. Somewhere Ethan Zaff made 7. By the end of the month, 3 of them would be gone. The summit complex, scene of budding friendships, excited chatter, and screaming arguments, became as silent as a tomb. As Everest moved within reach, the candidates retreated inside themselves and focused on their training with the concentration and tunnel vision only athletes understand. Sammy explained it in an interview for the website. Last week, we were supporting one another to get this far. Now, all of a sudden, it's me, me, me. There's too much at stake to be nice to people, Tilt agreed. Like he'd know anything about being nice to people, Chris muttered under his breath. But as a front-runner, confident, affable, Chris was feeling the pressure more than anyone. He had watched Ethan Zaff become a star by summiting Everest. Now it was finally his turn. His Dead Sea stand could be headed for the top of the world. A Summit Quest spot was his for the taking, but also his for the losing if he slacked off. My brother hasn't talked to me in 3 days, Dominic said on camera, but that's okay. He hasn't talked to anybody else either. Even the normally boisterous Tilt seemed subdued. In part, it was an effort to avoid angering Cap this close to the moment of decision. But it was also just a plain nervousness. To him, this was more than an expedition. It was his future. Mess up, and it was back home. Back to the paper route, back to his life as a nobody. Who knew he'd get another chance like this? Maybe never. So he kept his mouth shut while Ciro ran everybody ragged. A speed climb? Great idea, Cap. Of course, the slave driver didn't mention that they'd be doing it up on Amethyst Peak. A full sprint up a 13,000-foot mountain. 8 grueling hours on the ascent, plus 3 more going down. Get this, in the dark. No helmet lamps, no ropes, nothing. Guy could break a leg and cost himself a chance at the summit that really counted. Congratulations, Ciro told them as they lay gasping at the end. You've just put in a typical day's work in the Himalayas. Never mind that. The whole Everest route was fixed with ropes, and the closest thing to free climbing they'd be doing was a walk along the Yak Trail into base camp. Biggest challenge? Not stepping in the yak dew. Sure, Cap, anything you say. And when they had to wait an hour for Perry to catch up, Tilt didn't say a word about that either. Only Ciro knew why Perry was still alive in this thing, when he wasn't fit to carry Tilt's crampons. Meanwhile, meal times were the worst. With none of the candidates saying much, there were plenty of empty spaces for Ciro to fill with boring memories of his alpine career. Did I ever tell you about the time Gasherbrum? Once I was climbing in the Andes and there was this avalanche. I'll never forget the night I was trapped in a crevice on the Vision Massif in Antarctica. The others actually seemed to like those stupid climbing stories. Dominic especially. The Rent's eyes lit up every time Ciro opened his mouth, and even Tilt had to admit that Ciro's greatest hits was still better than having to listen to Sneezy's dumb jokes, or Dr. Obermann's probing questions. And how does that make you feel? It makes me feel like I want you to shut up. To minimize his chances of combusting in front of Ciro or his guides, Tilt had thrown himself into his schoolwork. The complex had a computer lab where the Everest hopefuls could keep up with their classes via the internet. These days, all of them were clocking major time there. It was a way to avoid conversation. Even Chris, the flunk-out champion of the group, was a student all of a sudden. Not that Chris was going to have any trouble getting a full ride to any college in the country. Ciro loved him. He was going up Everest no matter what. But he wouldn't be the youngest, not if Tilt Crowley had anything to say about it. Tilt slipped up only once in front of Zero. It happened on yesterday's ascent, low on the mountain, where there was a steep rock scramble that led through a narrow limestone crevice, almost like a vertical tunnel in the route. It was simple enough for a real alpinist, but Perry was obsessed with his lines and bolts and pintons. The guy would top rope a flight of stairs. Free climbing spooked him. He made it up the tunnel part okay, but at the opening, he just froze. Either he couldn't find the foothold, or he just couldn't compel his body to heave itself into the open. Zero was about 20 feet away, talking to Sneezy, who was shooting for the website. Tilt could have reached out and hauled Perry up by the collar, but it didn't make sense to show Zero that he had a climber who was either too uncoordinated or too chicken to execute a maneuver straight out of Mountaineering 101. Zero quickly took in the situation. "Give him a hand, Crowley." Tilt could have done it, should have done it, and the incident would have passed unnoticed. But then came frustration, the anger that some force was protecting this mediocre climber from washout. That should have happened weeks ago, and Tilt couldn't hold back. Maybe he should ask his guardian angel to come save him. The expedition leader glared at him. "I told you to help him out." Tilt yanked Perry up beside him. The red-haired boy brushed himself off. "Thanks." Tilt didn't answer. He was in equal measure enraged and terrified by the expression on Zero's face. The "I'm writing it all down, and this is going to cost you" look he had seen so many times before. That night, to stay out of Zero's face, he studied so hard for a science test that he scored 100%. If he didn't get to go to Everest, he reflected, at least he was turning himself into a genius in the process, and a hermit. That was the plan. Keep quiet, speak only when spoken to, and pray. Medical log. Psych profiles. Interview with Norman Crowley. Dr. Oberman. Tilt. Is that a climbing nickname? Tilt. No, ma'am. It's a name I got because I used to love playing old-fashioned pinball games. Dr. Oberman. Is mountaineering a Crowley family sport? Tilt. My parents aren't into it. Dr. Oberman. But you are? Tilt. Just climbing. It's everything to me. I'm nothing without it. Dr. Oberman. What about Everest? Think you'll make the team? Tilt. Hope so. Really counting on it. Dr. Oberman. What's your attitude towards your fellow climbers here at boot camp? Tilt. Everybody's great. I want to make it, but I wish them all luck. Dr. Oberman. And I'm talking to the real Tilt Crowley? Tilt. What do you mean? Dr. Oberman. The word around here is that you're abusive, unfriendly, uncooperative. Tilt. I understand. I really do. Climbing is very intense. And to be up against a competitive group like this, who wouldn't be scared of guys like Chris, Alexis, and Ethan Zaff? I guess I come on a little too strong. Do you think I should apologize to the others?